Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Filecoin Core Devs call number 66. Today, Thursday, 1st of February, 2024. We have an interesting agenda today. Let me see why that's okay. So Scott will have an open discussion really on core devs and decision making and participation and all of that. It's an open discussion, no presentation, just for us to exchange ideas. And then shortly after that, we would have EC finality calculated by Guy Gorin and Jay Suarez, and then NV22 planning and timeline updates. Without further ado, I will hand it over to you now, Will Scott.
Thanks, Lucky. So this is a thing I put on, or I asked to have on the agenda from a bit ago. We had a discussion that happened in Slack primarily around what FIPS were entering last call, timelines of those FIPS versus the N22 network upgrade. And one of the things that I think we noticed in that set of discussions is that while we have a regular cadence for core dev meetings of about once a month, where we can get to decisions to some extent, in that we can present something and then feel like, okay, we've said this, we can disseminate this, and by the next one or something, we can have made sure that that was disseminated and so forth. For things that need a more rapid buy-in, where we want to be able to say something like, this got socialized to core devs and there wasn't an objection, and so we're going to go with this as a plan. We don't really have a process that we feel comfortable with, in that we proposed things and then we had some pushback of, well, this was only a couple days, not necessarily everyone has had time to see or buy in or so forth. And I think what that demonstrated to me is that we don't have a clear expectation of what that minimum participation is, of like, oh, if you don't pay attention for a week, someone might need to propose something and we have cases where we say things like, in the event of security, we can have subsets that are doing security critical things and we can push stuff through relatively quickly. And so I think there's a combination of things that we should be considering here. One is a sort of minimum duration where you can consider something as sort of being socialized. And so if there's no objection after something gets discussed for, say, a week, does that mean that we can feel comfortable sort of saying this got brought up to core devs in some venue that we've said is sort of the primary place that everyone should be looking at least once a week, and there were no objections, and so that's sort of we should keep moving forward. I think some process around that is potentially warranted as a way to just feel more comfortable that we can distinguish between lack of response and is this just no one's read it, or is this that no one's objecting? And then I think the second one that maybe is a process that seems worth thinking about here is like, should we be designating what those places are? Is it the core dev Slack channel? Are there other places that we're sort of expected to be at? Is it just these regular meetings? We've got some expectations of what you're monitoring and what that means. But I think that's sort of the framing, is like, is there additional guidance that we can give ourselves so that we don't have this ambiguity of like, we're making more rapid decisions or have some desire to be able to get to some consensus, but don't really understand if we are representing something that is reached a majority consensus.
Thanks. Caitlin, you have your hand up. Do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think this flavor of like core dev participation and how do we ensure or understand the depth of that participation is a tough and long-standing problem. I like the idea of there being some kind of minimum threshold. For a long time, I think there was this sort of de facto norm of making sure that the FIP had been sort of presented to core devs and had been open for at least 2 weeks, just kind of mirroring the length of that last call process. I agree. I think this FIP moved to last call too quickly. The thing about minimum thresholds and timelines is that when someone wants something, they will push really hard against it. And when we have it as simply a best practice, it is liable to be changed, and that is challenging. I think the other thing we could do is, expect that there'd be like a 2 week, or I think 1 week might even be too short, period of time. We could also open PRs for the move to last call, which I think, Lucky, you're mostly doing now. I'm not sure if you have write access into the repo, but and required 2 FIP editors or 2 core devs, whatever it may be, to approve that pull request before the FIP does officially move. This does make it a little bit harder for communications when all of it is still pretty manual, but we could set up a bot to trigger whenever the PR gets merged, and it will notify folks that last call has started. I think 2 good options. But yeah, I think it's important that folks are all on the same page and no one is coming in with last minute kind of concerns or issues before we start to signal to the community members that a FIP is more ready for final consideration.
Thanks. Alex says 2 weeks seems good to me for things like draft FIPs too, but there'll be for sure other things that want faster turnarounds, like should we drop, other FIPs from the upcoming network upgrades or delay, which we have to decide in less than 1 week. Are there other comments or thoughts on this subject matter? Suggestions or further ideas?
I preferred if it weren't just like a notification in Slack. I preferred if we had some central place where we say like, hey, hey everyone, we are making a decision here. Like this is ideally what the RFC process is supposed to be. So ideally it would just be a policy decision and a PR against like FIP 0. But that can also be like heavyweight if it's not like if it's like a one-off, like we need to decide this right now. I don't have any concrete suggestions, I guess, but basically we need a central place to put this in a way to notify people, say, hey, this is actually important. You need to look at this now.
I wonder what other places we could, do that. Do you have ideas?
Well, I mean, so like I know we have like I think it's an issue in GitHub for like tracking the current release. So like if it's like, hey, we are thinking about changing something about this release, putting something there, and then like again tagging all the core devs that so they know that hey, they have to look at this, or potentially we don't want to create a new repo per release. Yeah, a comment there. Almost like there are lots of comments there, so they can get like you can kind of ignore them. You have to pay attention to like when you're summoned. I don't know how good people's email clients are about notifying them about that, but
okay, thanks. Jennifer.
I was a little bit late to the call, so I don't know what's discussed. But like to me, what's important is like we actually have a discussion before making the decisions. I think this what initiated this conversation was the thread about whether to include actor event in the upgrade and how that impacts the timeline. For me, I raised the thread in an open place, so to gather the feedback not only from my own team, but also from other teams. That's why I tagged, various folks there. I was hoping to get core devs feedback and ecosystem partners feedback. I think it's important to have a discussion from the key stakeholders who will be impacted by the decisions that we are making as a core dev group before we just jump into the decision. Like what I want to call out is like we shouldn't be rushing we should do the work to justify the decisions that we're making. Right, like it can be by having discussions. Sometimes it takes a couple days, takes a couple iterations. I think that's okay. From a process perspective, I just feel like it shouldn't be a decision made by a conversation has 4 people engaged in that. The core dev group is much larger than that. The community is much larger than that. So I would hope that we can have a place, right, like a well-fostered discussion place for those kind of the conversation, and we again not rush to make decisions, like because like it's not like everything is time sensitive, right? Like if it's a security thing for the network is going down if we don't do this by this time. So yes, sometimes we have to have like faster loops, but in general, I feel like yeah, taking over time, gather the input, evaluating the making decision tables or like pro and cons when needed. Yes, very critical for in our governance process.
Thank you.
I guess, Jenny, one question is, do you think there should be some way to convene a meeting out of off schedule? So like right now we have this monthly cadence. Should there be a way for us to say at a week granular notice that we want an out of schedule meeting to discuss that? Would that have worked? Did we know that this was happening and we should have had sort of a more formal discussion?
I think we work remotely around the world, right? Like, so we work in public. I think having async conversation is my primary preference to go. So right, like, so if we can just have a discussion in the core app group, like talking about, hey, this is the problem, this is the decision we need to make, and these are the feedback we should be getting from these kind of groups. And if if we can have some support from the Lucky or like Casely, to actually nudge the folks that to give the input in the discussion, and then if the TPMs can actually just like summarize the input from various people and then say, hey, from all these feedback, we believe this is the way right to go. I think that would be sufficient enough. For more like complicated, controversial discussion, sure. If we have to have an ad hoc meeting, I think that's okay as well, to talk things through. But for non-controversial thing that things can take a week, that's not gonna crush the network. I think we can just do async. That's my personal take.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Yeah, I think personally, this is something that is critically important, especially when it comes to participation. Sometimes I feel like perhaps maybe we can do like very simple polls where core devs can vote yes or no, or like I want to discuss this further or something. Because sometimes it's tough to get all of the input at once, and then it feels like only 4 people or two people are making that decision. Then I think I also agree with Jennifer. We need to utilize our Slack channel for some of these conversations because we're all around the world. Rather than creating another, in my opinion, another place where we can house these conversations, we can maintain the ones that we already have. But I think it's a conversation we can keep going just to make sure we get the processes right, so that it accommodates all of our, all of our opinions and the way forward. Without further ado, I can move this now over to, I believe it is Guy and Jay Suarez.
Hi. Thanks, Lucky. I know Guy is also on the call, but he told me I had to speak, so I'll do it. If you have questions, he's the one to answer them. But yeah, so today we wanted to talk to you about the AC finality calculator, which is an ongoing FRC discussion. We do plan to have the FRC very soon, but we'd love to get feedback as early as possible. And so, let's. What is this about, right? I mean, you've heard about finality in Filecoin quite a bit recently. That's been a focus of us, and we're pursuing work on F3 to get basically single epoch finality, right? But that's still a few months away, and we need fast finality now because it is a blocker for a lot of applications, and even for the ones that it's not blocking, it's just pretty annoying. So the core question at play here is, when is a transaction safe, right? So when can you trust that a transaction will not be reverted and that you perform all the off-chain actions related to it? This is critical for bridges. It's critical for anything that has implications outside the chain. And again, it's just a critical usability aspect that you want things to have low latency. So the first thing to take into account here is, what is safe? What is the definition? And longest chain protocols, including expected consensus, have probabilistic finality. So you're never 100% sure that chain will not be reverted. But but so you have this measure of safety, which is basically 1 minus the probability of that happening, right? And provided that that probability is very low, then you can assume that the transaction will remain on the chain. And so different chains have well, this is sort of a topic of research in its own right, but in practice, what happens is that there are different heuristics for different chains. Bitcoin, for instance, uses the 6 blocks typically, even though different users may have different confirmation rules. They may have to wait. They may want to wait longer or shorter periods, depending on the on multiple factors, including the value of the transaction at stake. But for Filecoin, the constants that we have in the code for finality is 900 epochs. Users are not required to wait the 900 epochs, and most of them do. Even most of them don't, even exchanges. But you see people waiting between 150 and 900 epochs. This is 30 seconds each, so at the limits, we're talking over 7 hours of wait for finality. How did we get to this number? I mean, there's actually pretty extensive analysis on this in the past, but that analysis was somewhat limited. It considered specific attacks. It wasn't completely general. It was asymptotic, and it considered the worst case scenario, right? So it considered that the chain was in the worst possible conditions. Can we move to the next slide, Lucky, please? But chains aren't always in the worst conditions, right? And so different chain histories, which you can observe locally, do provide you with different levels of confidence, right? If you have a chain in which you have, so in expected consensus, we have an expectation of 5 blocks per tip set, right? And if you have a full chain where you always have the 5 blocks per tip set, you are way more confident in that chain than if you have an unstable chain with very few blocks. And so that's basically what we are exploring with this work, which we're calling the EC finality calculator. We're doing a rigorous theoretical analysis that accounts for the actual observations, so for the local heaviest chain that we have, instead of always assuming the worst case. And then, of course, we do, as I said, a very rigorous probabilistic analysis of this. I think we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, and so basically we do this by breaking up the calculation into 3 parts. So we have the distant past, which is, again, chain history. Then we have the recent past, the things that are happening in the period around the observation. And then we have the future. And the future, of course, we have to assume the worst case because we cannot otherwise predict the future. But for the past, we can, right? And so that's the sort of knowledge that we're leveraging. And obviously, if in the worst case, we should get to more or less the same results, the more rigorous analysis aside, but we should still have long waits for finality. But in the good case, which is actually the most common case, we can reduce that latency quite a bit. And that's in the next slide. So this is a sample from, now I forget, but I think it's March 23. It's in the fifth discussion, but so it's a period. If you look at the first, let's say, 3 quarters of that plot, you have a period where the chain is more or less operating under normal conditions. So you usually have 5 blocks or around an average of 5 blocks per tip set.
Can you maybe explain what are we seeing in the graph?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let me just clarify the lines first. So in green, you have both the individual observations of blocks per tip sets. Those are the crosses. And you have the average over the last 30 epochs, which is, I think it's 30, yes, which is the green line, right? So a green line, and this is on the right axis, which is also in green, right? So you see that at the beginning, the green line is usually around 5, and then it drops towards the end. In blue, and on the left axis, you do have the probability, the error probability, which is, again, the probability of reversal or reorg that we had in the previous, in the initial slide, right? So the lower the probability, the more certain you are that your block will, that the chain will not be reverted, right? And so that the transactions are final. And so, yeah, what you see is that in the first 3 quarters, the average blocks per tip sets are near 5, as you would expect them to be. And so you have a low probability of error, right? So it's 10 to the minus 12 on average, let's say. And then once you get to the latter part of the horizontal axis, the chain conditions start to degrade, and so you have fewer blocks per tip sets, going to an average of 4 point something, and your uncertainty as to the finality of the transaction also starts increasing, right? And so at this time, you would have to wait longer in order to consider a transaction final, whereas in the first part, you would have to wait a shorter time. And I think we have one last slide. Yeah, and so basically that's what the calculator does, right? I mean, it looks at the history, it runs the calculations, and it tells you the probability. And then based on that probability, you can make your own decision of whether you consider something final or not. Those 900 epochs that I mentioned earlier, that was modeled to attain to the power of minus 30 error probability, which is about the same as 10 to the power of minus 10, which is about the same as 1 reversal in 10,000 years. That you can target that same level of certainty, which when the chain is operating normally, you can attain in around 30 epochs instead of 900 epochs. So this is about a 30 times speed up, and it means you just have to wait around 15 minutes for finality. Obviously, if the chain conditions are degraded, then this might be a longer delay, but this is dynamic, and you will get that information and be able to make that decision instead of having a hard-coded, just blind constant. The other thing that you can do is that you may want different certainty based on the type of operations that you're doing or the value of operations, right? And so this allows you to basically fine-tune the level of certainty that you want, and therefore the time that you are waiting for finality based on your actual requirements. In terms of applications, I mean, I think I mentioned this at first, right? But the good thing about this is that the EC calculator does not require any protocol changes. All it requires is access to the local heaviest chain, so it's whole client side. It can provide a bridging mechanism, bridging in time, not bridging on the technical sense, until we wait while we wait for F3 deployment. It's still useful afterwards because F3 also has an EC fallback, so this is something that will remain on the chain. And yeah, I mean, basically, if you need fast finality today, this is the way to accomplish it. Next steps, we do have this FIP, well, it's an FRC discussion open, but in the FIP repo. So please contribute if you have any feedback. We have both the theoretical and the practical and an implementation prototype outlined in that discussion. So feel free to have a look and let us know your thoughts. And we will actually be submitting an FRC and a cleaned up theoretical derivation. I keep saying the next few days, but hopefully, yes, in the next week, I do plan to have that. And yeah, that's it. I don't know if you have any questions for, again, Guy is your question answer, Guy.
Questions or comments? Looks like it was very clear. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, I know a few of you already commented both in Slack and on the FIP discussion, so thank you so much. But again, like, if you have any thoughts, please let us know.
Thank you so much. So I'll pass this now over to, oh yeah, I think you're here.
Yeah. Hey everyone. So as the NV22 upgrade dates are approaching. We have like reviewed the engineering process and want to highlight a few challenges that might impact our current timelines. We have done a lot of like DRAM testing in local devnets, but we have yet to test the DRAM change with like multiple client implementations on the same network, which is a prerequisite for the calibration network upgrade. We also have the DDO protocol changes, which is probably one of the bigger changes in this network upgrade. We have protocol tests, but we still have to rely on like client integration to fully test the protocol paths, and that testing is still pending. For the actor code freeze, we also fell behind by 2 days. And with DDO and the actor events, there is a lot of like ecosystem tooling changes, which has limited integration and testing for those changes as of now, which raises like some concerns about like the correctness of DDO and the events themselves, which might impact like metrics and data from ecosystem partners. Then we also had a lot of like critical infra migrations in January, which has like impacted calibration and its readiness. And we want to like be very sure that like the calibration network is ready for the network upgrade. And finally, we also have like Chinese New Year, which impacts testing and like integration capabilities before the calibration network upgrade. So yeah, with that said, do you want to like suggest that we revise the upgrade timelines a little bit? So essentially move the calibration upgrade date from February the 20th to February the 27th, and move the main network upgrade from the March 18th to March 26th. I posted a longer message in the implementers channel on Slack, and also cross-posted it to the core devs group and a couple of other community channels for visibility. And yeah, so feel free to ask any question or share your concerns here or in that thread.
Any comments? I have just an open question that we can think about, particularly now that we are transitioning, or rather we're testing out the pre-scheduled upgrade, structure. How should we approach issues like this, in the future? I guess potentially all of the already pre-scheduled upgrade timelines, we can consider them as, tentative because of, constraints like this, so that in future it's not going to be a big deal or so much of a discussion across multiple parties. I don't know if my question is clear.
Yeah.
I would like to just like build in a little bit of buffer. It's like ideally you can slip everything by like a few days here and there, and nothing goes wrong. I don't know if we've already used our buffer this time or something, but
we didn't have a buffer for this one. But yeah, I think that's a lesson learned. Yes, Jennifer.
Also, like I mentioned in the other thread that we're having upgrade, right, like timeline conversations, I think it's always useful just to give a range of the upgrade, because like with the goal here is to give the community members and also the implementers an expectation of when things are shipping, right? So folks can plan around that. How precise that date is less important, but it's the range of when things are gonna happen is important. So like normally I would say things like early March, mid-March, and late March, right? Like so like folks know, okay, during those 10 days, I should expect some upgrade to coming or some like Lotus or Forest Venus releases to coming. I think that's what the community are looking for. So if we can just, for us as core dev, we should commit to have a say mid-March upgrade, right? So we should commit to that, and then plan our work to ship that upgrade for the community, because that's our commitment to the network. But then the granularity on like what day is less important. So yeah, my suggestion is to give a range rather than a specific date, and say final date is project to change based on the engineering timeline. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess also with that, with the
I
range.
just want to quickly say that I agree with that. There's a lot of moving parts with upgrades, and as the protocol has evolved, those number of parts has only increased. So some fuzziness does feel a little unavoidable.
Okay.
But honestly, like I'm very interested in hearing feedbacks from like other implementation teams on these matters, because like Lotus has been taking an active position on like, you know, figuring out engineering timelines since in the past, but now we're working more collaboratively with, you know, especially for Snow as they went on like production mainnet last year. I'm curious about if you guys have any suggestions on how we coordinate upgrade timelines and so on and so forth. But also, Stephen, I want to hear from you.
Sorry, different Stephen.
Different Stephen. I work with you every day, so I'm anyhow. But yes.
Okay. And I think from the community point of view, and there could be it could be very good and have a very expectation of the coming upgrading. Just as I mentioned, I think 1 year ago, it's better for us have a for example, have a quarterly upgrading. That will be good for people to preparing and for the next upgrading, and to keep the engineering resources for that, or plan ahead. This is one thing I'm thinking of, and also agree with Jennifer about for the exact date of the upgrading, and actually there are lots of factors which could impact the date. So I would think that it's okay for us to have a time. For example, the next upgrade will be mid-March, but we need to have this certain at least 1 month. Because and at least 1 month in advance. I mean, because we have the code phrase and also have all the tests before we launch it into the calibration. We have the confidence before that. So I think we could have the date, the exact date, 1 month before real launch. That's my opinion, I think.
So you're saying to basically like let it be fuzzy until a month ahead of time when everything is all set and ready, and then set the date.
Yeah, I think that's the so basically like when we have all the FIP, when we finalize all the FIP and the FIP are implemented, that's when we can give more precise date.
Right. I do want to note though, I feel like, I don't know, any amount of fuzziness can always be modeled as an upper bound and a lower bound, and we can just pick the upper bound. Like if the code is ready, how to put this, there's no reason to just like not have the upgrades slightly later and let the code be ready longer. Where effectively say, hey, like we want to have all of the code ready like a month or even 2 months in advance, and then it'll just sit there already all merged. But I guess that can make it very tempting to try to sneak something else in. But as long as we're reasonably strict about our timelines, but then give us a massive buffer on the backside, I think that does basically the same thing as having fuzziness. But
from my perspective, also like when you have a upper bound, it's easier for you to slack because it's always like I have a couple more days to work on that.
So, but you have an upper bound, but that's like for the release. But then you have like you have a timeline where like the the final deadline is like a month in advance of that, and you're very like basically once you hit that point, you're treating it like a panic event. Now you have to make sure you treat it like a panic event. But yeah, I don't know.
Kuba has a hand.
I don't.
Okay. More comments or questions on this? Personally, in my opinion, I think whatever works in terms of, engineering constraints and timelines and that of implementation teams, because I'm sure there are lots of other considerations that are going into this upgrades. We can be fuzzy and just give the month range, say June, mid-June, and whatever, that could work. Otherwise, we can also like have tentative dates that we can look forward to as like our North Star, something like that. And then I can also always propose like a buffer timeline in between to give us that flex time just in case anything goes wrong. In order to accommodate, changes like this. But I think at the end of the day, we all do agree that, look, we should maintain pre-scheduled timelines. It can be either months or specific dates or with buffer dates, whatever, but something that the community members can always reference and see, okay, at least by this time, we should have the next upgrade. So, yeah, are there comments on this or immediate thoughts? Concerns? We still have a bit more time. Just reading the comments. Yeah.
I want to give folks an update here. Critical network infrastructure. So as like many of the folks already know, we are trying to have like more network teams that's contributing to the network development. And there are a couple of teams in the network recently are stepping up to providing critical service for the network. So I just want to let the core dev know who they are and get in touch. And just in case that the network needs them, we know where to find them. So the first one is chain safe. So before the field infra team at the protocol labs does a lot of the network DevOps work, for example, running mainnet bootstrap node or operating the calibration testnet. Some of the critical infrastructure work of the network are now shared with ChainSafe DevOps team. So Josh from ChainSafe team is currently working on that right now. So we do plan to. Oh, if you have any questions about the infra things or the calibration, we do have the public field infra channel where we can reach out to them. And also, if you have any questions about the faucet on calibration or like, any status check on the calibration network, we have the FieldNet calibration discuss where we can reach out to implementer teams, but also ChainSafe team about that network. The second change is Starboard that we're all familiar with, who providing very nice dashboard analytics matrix for the network. They are also taking up more responsibility to get a network matrix and alerting system set up. So they will be building more like matrix tracking analytical monitoring work for the core devs. So if you have any requests, please go chat with Starboard, and they are here to support us. But yeah, that's it. Is there any questions from folks? Cool.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for your contributions. We'll see you again next month for Filecoin Core Devs call number 67. Have a great rest of the day, evening, or morning. Goodbye.
Bye.